Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Tuesday, April 14th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. The high in Riverside today is 71.7 degrees, with a low of 49.5. It is a temperate day, perfect for staying informed. In today's episode, we examine the complications behind the record DHS shutdown and how it is impacting recovery efforts following that historic super typhoon. We are also looking into the White House strategy for bridging the massive deficit of 10 million homes across the country. Beyond those reports, we have a variety of other stories to keep you updated on the latest developments happening around the world. Stay with us for all of this and more as we break down the most important news of the day right here on Alex's News. We're starting this morning with a monster storm in the Western Pacific. Super Typhoon Sinlaku is right now battering the Northern Mariana Islands and threatening Guam. It's the most powerful storm recorded anywhere on the planet this year, and it's colliding with a federal government that's partly shut down. Ethan has been tracking the latest developments for us. Ethan, how strong is this storm?
Grace, this is an extraordinarily dangerous system. We're talking sustained winds between 175 and 180 miles per hour, with gusts topping 200. That puts it firmly at Category 5 equivalent strength. According to PBS News and AccuWeather, Sinlaku underwent rapid intensification in the Western Pacific and reached what the Japan Meteorological Agency classifies as violent status. As of this morning, the eye is sitting just southeast of Saipan and Tinian, crawling northwest at roughly 9 miles per hour. That slow movement means these islands are absorbing punishment for hours on end.
With the storm moving that slowly, what's the situation on Guam?
Guam actually caught a bit of a break. The storm's track shifted slightly north, so the eye wall isn't making a direct pass over the island. But that doesn't mean Guam is in the clear. ABC News and the Washington Post report the island is still enduring tropical storm to Category 1 winds, with gusts reaching 80 miles per hour and hazardous surf hammering the coastline. It's really Saipan and Tinian that are bearing the full brunt. Meteorologists at the Joint Typhoon Warning Center have recorded maximum wave heights of 43 feet out there and are warning of life-threatening storm surges, particularly around Garapan and Tinian's harbor.
Is it unusual to see a typhoon this powerful in April?
Extremely unusual. The San Francisco Chronicle notes that a cyclone of this magnitude in April hasn't been seen since Super Typhoon Hester back in 1953. That's more than 70 years ago. What's also getting a lot of attention is that Sinlaku isn't an isolated event. It's part of an unusual triplet of cyclones spinning at the same time, alongside Tropical Cyclone Mela and Tropical Cyclone Vayanu. Some meteorologists believe this pattern could signal the onset of a Super El Niño later this year, which would carry implications far beyond the Pacific.
What kind of damage are we seeing on the ground right now?
The reports out of Saipan and Tinian are devastating. The Commonwealth Utilities Corp confirms both islands have experienced a total power grid collapse. We're not talking scattered outages. The transmission infrastructure is so severely damaged that restoration could take weeks or even months. Over on Guam, the Guam Power Authority reports that approximately 25 to 30% of the island is without electricity. On top of that, Team Rubicon and the National Weather Service say nearly all metal-roofed homes in the eyewall's path on Saipan and Tinian are expected to be destroyed. Significant debris is blocking major transportation routes, which will make getting help in even harder.
Have there been any casualties reported?
Remarkably, as of midday today, there are no official confirmed fatalities across the Marianas. The American Red Cross attributes that to very high compliance with evacuation orders. More than 700 residents moved into reinforced concrete shelters ahead of the storm, and that preparation appears to have saved lives. It's a testament to the early warning systems and the local emergency teams. But the storm is still moving through, so complete damage assessments simply can't begin until conditions improve.
Walk us through the federal response. What's been mobilized?
President Trump has approved federal emergency declarations for both Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. According to PBS News, that authorization has dispatched nearly 100 FEMA staff members to the region, along with teams from the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Transportation, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. On the nonprofit side, the American Red Cross has deployed nearly 100 trained disaster workers from the U.S. mainland and is managing school-turned-shelter facilities. Team Rubicon has also activated its virtual emergency operations center to plan debris removal and damage assessment, and they're treating this as a full domestic operation.
What about the military side of things?
That's a big piece of this. Military coordination is running through Joint Task Force Micronesia and Joint Region Marianas. Rear Admiral Brett Maetis and Rear Admiral Josh Lasky have both confirmed that military assets are postured and ready to go. That includes medical assistance and maritime transport for what's formally called defense support of civil authorities. They'll move in the moment. Weather conditions allow safe operations. Given the total grid collapse and debris-choked roads on Saipan and Tinian, that military capability is going to be absolutely essential in the first days of recovery.
Now here's where the story gets really complicated. There's a government shutdown layered on top of all this.
That's right, and it's not just any shutdown. The Department of Homeland Security shutdown has now entered its 61st day today, making it the longest on record. It started on February 14th, exactly 2 months ago. The Washington Post and Time report the impasse stems from a congressional deadlock over H.R. 7744. Democrats are demanding reforms that include judicial warrant requirements for immigration and customs enforcement and customs and border protection. They also want the removal of qualified immunity for federal agents following fatal shootings in Minneapolis earlier this year. Neither side has budged, and this storm is exposing just how dangerous that stalemate has become for real people in harm's way.
What does the shutdown actually mean for FEMA's ability to help?
It creates what you could call a starvation budget. According to FEMA and NPR, the agency is operating with just $3.6 billion remaining in its disaster relief fund. For context, FEMA had requested $26 billion for replenishment. Under what are called immediate needs funding restrictions, that $3.6 billion can only be spent on life-saving and life-sustaining activities, specifically Category B emergency protective measures. But here's the critical part. New grants for permanent reconstruction are completely prohibited. That means repairs to roads, bridges, and power grids on Saipan and across Guam cannot be authorized right now, no matter how badly they're needed.
And I understand there are serious staffing problems on top of that.
There are. Approximately 4,000 FEMA employees are currently working without pay. Think about what that does to morale and retention during a crisis like this. On top of that, the FEMA Go system, which is the digital platform local governments rely on to draw down recovery funds, is currently offline. So even in cases where funding might technically exist on paper, the mechanism to actually access it isn't functioning. It's a logistical nightmare layered right on top of a natural disaster.
There's also a pretty striking irony baked into this whole situation, isn't there?
There really is, and both Al Jazeera and The Guardian have highlighted it. While FEMA, the TSA, and the Coast Guard are all crippled by this shutdown, Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection remain flush with cash. Those agencies received multi-year funding all the way through 2029 under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which passed last July. So the very agencies at the center of this political dispute are completely unaffected financially by the shutdown. Congress essentially has zero funding leverage over the agencies it's arguing about, while disaster response agencies are the ones starving.
Looking further down the road, what happens to the Marianas once the winds die down?
That's the real fear among emergency management experts right now. Without a breakthrough in Congress on H.R. 7744, the Northern Mariana Islands face what people are calling a secondary disaster. The immediate needs, food, water, search and rescue, those are being addressed. But the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program and Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grants are both suspended. That means the long-term rebuilding needed to harden these islands against future storms is at a complete standstill. Private contractors are reportedly hesitant to mobilize heavy equipment without a guaranteed federal payment schedule. If this political standoff drags on, We could be looking at critical infrastructure left in ruins not for months, but potentially for years.
Really sobering situation on multiple fronts. Ethan, thank you for walking us through all of that. We'll keep following this story throughout the day. That is story 1 this morning. Let's move to our second story this morning, a major new report on the nation's housing crisis. The White House Council of Economic Advisors has just released its 2026 economic report of the president, and the numbers are staggering. Chloe, what are we looking at here?
Grace, the headline figure is a deficit of 10 million houses across the United States. That's the gap between what we have and what we need, according to White House economists. PBS News, reporting via the Associated Press, says the administration traces this shortage all the way back to the 2008 financial crisis. Between 1968 and 2008, the country averaged about 1.5 million housing completions every year. After the crash, that number was cut roughly in half, dropping to around 750,000 for years, and we just never caught back up.
So the building slowed down. But what happened to prices in the meantime?
They took off. The CEA report shows that since 2000, real house prices have skyrocketed by 82%, while real median incomes grew by just 12%. For a while, historically low interest rates papered over that gap and kept monthly payments somewhat manageable. But Al Jazeera points out that the ongoing war with Iran has pushed energy costs and inflation higher, which has rippled into the mortgage market. 30-year mortgage rates have climbed from under 6% to 6.37%, and that's put homeownership out of reach for a lot of voters under 40.
Home prices up nearly 7-fold compared to income growth over 25 years. That's a striking disparity. So what's the administration actually proposing to fix this?
The centerpiece is what the White House calls eliminating the bureaucrat tax. Their economists estimate that a tangle of federal, state, and local regulations adds more than $100,000 to the cost of building a single new home. We're talking zoning approvals, building code changes, compliance fees, all layered on top of each other. The Daily Breeze and MPA Mag both report that the administration is specifically targeting green energy standards from the Biden era. The White House says requirements for high-efficiency HVAC systems, water heaters, and ductwork alone add up to $31,000 per home, and it cites builder data suggesting a homeowner would need up to 90 years to recoup that through energy savings.
90 years to break even? That's certainly going to get people's attention. What does the White House say these rollbacks would actually accomplish?
The projections are ambitious. The administration says cutting this red tape would unleash the construction of 13.2 million new homes over the next decade. They also project it would add 1.3 percentage points to annual GDP growth and support roughly 2 million jobs in manufacturing and construction. Those are the kinds of numbers that sound great on the campaign trail heading into the midterms, but as we'll get to, not everyone's buying them.
Before we get to the skeptics, walk us through the executive actions backing this up.
Sure, President Trump signed 2 foundational executive orders back in March. The first, EO 14394, directs agencies like the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers to streamline environmental permitting under the Clean Water Act and NEPA. It also instructs HUD to develop best practices for local governments. And here's the leverage point. The administration is considering making federal funding for states and cities contingent on their efforts to reduce local zoning barriers. The second order, EO 14393, is about mortgage credit. It aims to tailor regulations for smaller community banks and modernize digital signatures to make the lending process smoother.
And there's legislation too, right? Tell us about the bill that moved through the Senate.
That's the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, designated H.R. 6644. It passed the Senate on March 12th with a massive 89-10 bipartisan vote. Housing Finance and NCSHA both reported on the key provisions. The bill would expedite NEPA reviews for small-scale housing developments and permanently reauthorize the Home Investment Partnerships Program. It also modernizes definitions for manufactured and modular housing so they can qualify for FHA products. And it raises the public welfare investment cap for banks from 15% to 20%, freeing up more capital for affordable housing.
89 to 10 is a huge margin. It sounds like there's broad agreement that something needs to happen. But I understand there's a more controversial piece of this puzzle involving Wall Street?
There really is, and this is where things get heated. Back on January 20th, the president signed an executive order titled Stopping Wall Street from Competing with Main Street Home Buyers. The goal is to block large institutional investors from snapping up single-family homes by limiting federal financing and securitization support. Realtor.com and Brookings report that, as of this month, corporate purchases of single-family homes are down 90% from their 2022 peaks. In cities like Atlanta and Phoenix, big investors have actually flipped to being net sellers, currently unloading nearly 2 properties for every one they buy. That's created a temporary inventory pop that's helped some first-time buyers, but it's also led to a decline in new build-to-rent projects.
Build-to-rent has been a growing part of the market. What happens to that sector under this plan?
This is where it gets really contentious. Section 901 of the Road to Housing Act mandates a 7-year forced sale of build-to-rent communities. Industry groups are furious. The National Multifamily Housing Council and the Real Estate Roundtable have both come out swinging against it. They argue the provision is unconstitutional under the Fifth Amendment's Takings Clause. They're also warning it could reduce build-to-rent activity by 60%, which they say would remove about 72,000 homes from annual production. As of today, April 14th, those groups are actively lobbying House leadership to strip that provision out before final vote.
So there's a real legal fight brewing. What about independent researchers? Are they on board with the broader deregulation plan?
Not entirely, and some of the pushback is pretty substantive. Studies from the Urban Institute and the Turner Center for Housing Innovation argue that a big chunk of that $100,000 bureaucrat tax isn't actually red tape. They say much of it consists of essential impact fees that fund sewers, roads, and schools for new developments. Their warning is straightforward. If you slash those fees without an alternative funding plan, you could see a real collapse in local service quality. So it's not as simple as just cutting a check and moving on.
That's a fair point. You build houses, but you also need infrastructure to support them. Is there anything else giving economists pause?
There's a fundamental contradiction sitting right at the heart of the president's goals. The CEA report calls for a massive supply increase to close that 10 million home gap, but President Trump has privately signaled he wants property values to stay high for current homeowners. Al Jazeera reported that Trump told his cabinet, quote, "I don't want to drive housing prices down. I want to drive housing prices up for people that own their homes," end quote. The administration's workaround is to focus on lowering mortgage interest rates rather than nominal sale prices. But economists point out that flooding the market with millions of new homes would naturally push prices down. That's just supply and demand.
You can't really have it both ways, can you? More supply and higher prices don't usually go together.
They really don't. And that's the tightrope the administration is walking heading into the 2026 midterms. They want to position this housing blueprint as a central pillar of their economic platform, something that appeals to both renters struggling to buy and homeowners watching their equity. But the war with Iran keeps putting upward pressure on mortgage rates, which undercuts the affordability message. And there are legal challenges mounting against the rollback of green energy standards, including a recent federal ruling in Texas that sided with 15 Republican-led states. So even within the president's own coalition, there are complications.
It sounds like closing that 10 million home gap is going to be a long road, no pun intended.
It really will be. The political will seems to be there on both sides of the aisle given that 89 to 10 Senate vote. But the details, the legal battles over build-to-rent, the tension between supply and prices, the infrastructure funding questions, those are going to define whether this blueprint actually delivers or just becomes another set of promises. There's a lot riding on it for millions of Americans who simply can't afford a home right now.
Chloe, really thorough reporting on a story that affects so many families. Thanks for breaking it all down for us.
Happy to do it, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. The House of Representatives is feeling a bit more spacious today after a bipartisan cleaning of the House. Representatives Eric Swalwell of California and Tony Gonzalez of Texas both pulled the ripcord on their careers this Monday, April 13, 2026. Swalwell is bowing out following allegations of sexual assault and misconduct, a scandal that also forced him to stop running for California governor. Just hours later, Gonzalez admitted to an affair with a staffer who has since passed away, leading to his own resignation. Their colleagues were already sharpening their pens for rare expulsion resolutions that would have required a 2/3 majority, but these exits have effectively ended the House Ethics Committee's jurisdiction. This leaves 2 empty chairs in California and Texas for months, thinning the already slim margins in the 119th Congress and turning up the heat on other lawmakers like Sheila Cherfilis McCormick and Corey Mills, who are facing their own legal storms. Turning to global affairs, the United States and Iran are trying to find a bridge over troubled waters before their 2-week ceasefire expires on April 21. Following a failed 21-hour marathon summit in Islamabad, diplomats are hoping for a second round of talks this Thursday, potentially returning to Pakistan or heading to Geneva to end the 6-week war. Washington is currently keeping its cards close to the chest, with a naval blockade of Iranian ports and the Strait of Hormuz, a maximum pressure tactic aimed at freezing Tehran's uranium enrichment for 20 years. While President Trump is open to a deal, the two sides are still worlds apart on nuclear dismantling and the regional influence Iran has exerted since the hostilities began on February 28. In Europe, Hungary has seen a massive political sea change as Peter Magyar's Tisza party swamped the competition. By capturing 138 of the 199 seats, they have officially ended Viktor Orban's 16-year reign and set the nation on a pro-European Union path. In Benin, Finance Minister Romuald Wadagni secured a landslide victory with over 94% of the vote, ensuring he will lead the nation through 2033. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has found solid ground as his Liberal Party secured a parliamentary majority thanks to key special election wins in Ontario and Quebec. In Hollywood, a cast of over 1,000 industry giants, including J.J. Abrams and Denis Villeneuve, are hoping to script a different ending for the proposed $111 billion merger between Paramount and Warner Bros. Discovery. They fear this corporate marriage would leave the industry with only 4 major studios and lead to a sequel of job losses. Meanwhile, Sony is swinging into action at CinemaCon, showing off footage for the upcoming Spider-Man Brand New Day and Jumanji Open World. Film chief Tom Rothman is pushing for cheaper tickets and longer theatrical windows to keep the box office momentum going after a first quarter that raked in a record-breaking $1.77 billion, the strongest showing since 2019. Finally, World Aquatics is making waves by allowing Russian and Belarusian athletes to return to competition under their own flags and anthems for the first time since 2022. In figure skating, silver medalist Yuma Kageyama is taking an ice-cold break for the 26-27 season to reflect on his future. On the ice, Swiss hockey coach Patrick Fischer is in the penalty box of public opinion after admitting he used a fake vaccination certificate to enter the Beijing Olympics. As LA28 kicks off its first global ticket drop and approaches an April 17 media deadline, the French Alps 2030 organizers are still locked in a mountain-sized dispute over venues between Nice and Lyon. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.